Ghost ships of Andromeda. The drifting silence. The Nova drifter cut through the dark expanse of space, its engines humming steadily. The ship was old, worn by years of salvage missions, but its crew was seasoned, ready for whatever came next. They had navigated the vast, empty stretches of space for months, scraping by with whatever they could find. But today, something different awaited them. "Captain, you need to see this," came the voice of helmsman Avery, crackling through the comms. Arlen Vega, the captain, stood from her chair and walked toward the navigation console. "What's going on, Avery?" Captain Vega asked, her voice steady, betraying none of the curiosity bubbling inside her. "Deep space anomaly," Avery replied. "Something. A signal, Captain. Weak, but it's there. It's a ghost signal." Vega frowned, looking at the screen. The signal was faint, interrupted by static, but the frequency was unusual. It wasn't like any distress signal or transmission she had ever encountered. It had an eerie pattern to it, repeating, almost as if it were trying to communicate. "Where's it coming from?" Vega asked, crossing her arms. Avery hesitated for a moment, eyes scanning the coordinates. "The Black Veil. It's a dead zone, Captain. No ships ever come back from there." The Black Veil was a section of deep space known for its strange energy disturbances. Few dared to venture into it, as the stars in that region flickered out like dying embers, leaving only a vast emptiness. The few ships that had gone in had never returned. It was a graveyard, a place feared by many in the galaxy. Vega stared at the blinking coordinates. There were no records of any ships in that sector, no active operations, no reasons to go there. But the signal, it called to her. "Plot a course, Avery," Vega ordered. "We'll investigate." The crew of the Nova drifter was no stranger to the risks of salvage work. They had seen wrecks, abandoned ships, and strange artifacts that sometimes whispered of things best left undisturbed. But this was different. A signal from a ghost fleet. Something didn't sit right with Vega, but her curiosity got the better of her. The crew could use the credits a find like this would bring. As the Nova drifter surged forward, the silence of space seemed to press in on them. The stars around them became fewer, their light dimming as they approached the Black Veil. The ship's sensors flickered, a wave of static washing over the console as the distortion from the anomaly grew stronger. "Incoming," Avery called out, his voice tense. "I'm picking up several ships in the vicinity." "They're stationary. Dead ships?" Vega asked, not sure she wanted to hear the answer. "Could be," Avery replied. "No life signs, but their systems are still active." Vega nodded. "Prepare the crew for boarding. Let's see what's going on here." The Nova drifter glided toward the cluster of derelict ships, their dark forms like silent specters in the void. The alien vessels were massive, their designs unlike anything Vega had seen before. Sharp, angular shapes with no visible ports or windows. The ships had clearly been abandoned for a long time, their surfaces scorched and cracked from years of neglect. Vega stood at the head of her crew in the docking bay as the airlock to one of the larger ships opened. They had suited up in their salvage gear, and weapons were holstered at their sides, just in case. The crew moved cautiously through the docking corridor, the only sound the soft hum of their boots against the metallic floors. "Keep your eyes open," Vega muttered. "This place is a graveyard." The air inside the alien ship was stale, carrying the faintest trace of something old, dry, almost chemical. The interior was vast, a cavernous expanse with dim, flickering lights. Control panels lined the walls, most of them dark, with only the faintest glow from the emergency lights. "How long have these ships been here?" Vega asked, scanning the room. "Years, at least," one of the engineers, Rylan, answered. "But the power is still running. It doesn't make sense." Vega frowned. "Let's split up, check for anything useful." The crew fanned out, moving cautiously through the ship. There was no sign of life. No crew members, no cargo, nothing that would explain why these ships were still powered. They found nothing but abandoned consoles, empty rooms, and lifeless halls. But then a voice broke the silence. "Did you hear that?" Ryland's voice crackled over the comms. "I swear, I heard something." The crew stopped. Vega's heart skipped a beat. "Hear what?" she asked, walking toward the sound. "I'm not sure," Ryland said, his voice trembling. It was like whispering. Static. Vega felt a chill run down her spine. She moved quickly toward Ryland's location, finding him standing in front of a console, staring at it with wide eyes. "Ryland?" Vega called out, her voice low. "What is it?" He pointed to the screen. The static had cleared, revealing a distorted image. A face, or at least the outline of one, faint but unmistakable. The whispers seemed to grow louder, now more like a language, alien, but somehow familiar. The crew gathered around, the tension thick in the air. Vega's stomach twisted. There was something wrong about all of this. "Captain," Ryland began, but his voice trailed off. The whispers on the screen were louder now. Unintelligible, but desperate. It was as if the voices were reaching out, pleading for something. "Get it off." Another crew member, Jael, yelled. "Turn it off. Make it stop." But before anyone could act, the ship around them rumbled. The lights flickered, and a low hum echoed through the walls. Then the airlock hissed. A door that had been sealed for years slid open. The crew froze. A cold, mechanical voice echoed through the ship's comms. "Powering up." The sound of machinery coming to life was deafening. The alien ship, the one they had thought abandoned, powered on by itself. Its systems hummed to life, the lights brightening in a strange, eerie rhythm. "Captain," Ryland gasped, his voice shaking. "It's locking onto us." Vega's breath caught in her throat. The ship was alive, its systems running, its weapons powered up, and it was aiming directly at the Nova Drifter. "Everyone, back to the ship now," Vega ordered. The crew ran, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the empty halls. They reached the airlock just as the ship's massive engines began to hum, shifting its weight as it began to move. Something was drawing it toward them. Vega felt her pulse quicken as she reached the Nova Drifter, the crew already scrambling to get inside. "Get us out of here, Avery," Vega shouted as she strapped into her seat. Avery hit the thrusters, but the strange alien vessel was already in pursuit. Its weapons hummed to life, and for the first time in years, Vega could feel the unmistakable presence of an enemy, an unknown force that was out there, waiting. As the Nova Drifter surged forward, the ghost signal flickered again on their consoles, now louder than ever. The whispers continued. "You are not alone." The Nova Drifter rocketed away, but the alien ship locked onto their trajectory. They were being hunted. The air inside the alien ship was thick with the smell of rust and decay. It felt as though the very walls had been waiting for them to come, as if the ship had been holding its breath for centuries. The crew of the Nova Drifter moved cautiously through the narrow corridors, the faint hum of their suits' oxygen systems, the only sound breaking the oppressive silence. The vessel was like nothing they had ever seen before, its design both foreign and organic, with dark, smooth surfaces that seemed to pulse with an eerie energy. "Stay alert," Captain Arlen Vega commanded, her voice steady, though there was an edge of unease beneath her calm exterior. She led the way, with the rest of the crew following closely behind, their boots making soft thuds against the metal floor. As they ventured deeper into the ship, Vega couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. The eerie quiet was too perfect, too unnatural. There were no signs of life, no signs of a crew, nothing to suggest that the ship had ever been inhabited. It was as though it had been abandoned, or worse, left intentionally. "Myra, check the ship's logs," Vega ordered, her voice cutting through the silence. Tech Officer Myra leaned over the console, her fingers dancing across the strange alien interface. The screens flickered, some of them flashing in a language Vega couldn't understand. But then, with a soft peep, Myra's fingers paused. She glanced up at the captain, her face pale beneath the visor of her helmet. "Captain," Myra's voice crackled over the comms. "The logs are in a human dialect." Vega's heart skipped a beat. Human dialect. There should have been no human presence on this ship. The Nova Drifter was the closest human vessel in this part of space. She walked over to Myra, her boots echoing in the empty hall, and looked at the screen. The text was clear, and the more Vega read, the more her blood ran cold. "They're dated," Myra continued. "The logs are from decades ago. The last entry was only a few years ago." Vega's mind raced. How could a human ship be here, lost in the middle of nowhere? She scanned the text, looking for any sign of what had happened to the crew. But there were no answers, only fragmented messages, incomplete entries, and warnings that made no sense. "Can you pull up the last message?" Vega asked. Myra nodded and tapped a few commands. The screen flickered again, and then the last message appeared. "This ship, it has become too dangerous. It whispers, we can't escape. Please, warn others." The message cut off abruptly. Vega stared at the screen, her breath catching. The words lingered in the air like a ghost, haunting her thoughts. "Do you think this was a human ship?" Myra asked, her voice shaky. Vega nodded slowly. "I don't know, but I think it's connected to something we don't understand." Suddenly, a noise echoed from deeper in the ship. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Vega's hand went to her sidearm. Instinctively, she gestured for the crew to move forward. They couldn't stay in one place for long. "I'll go ahead," Vega said. "You all check the other sections. Stay in comms range." The crew split up, each taking a different path through the labyrinthine hallways. As Vega moved through the dimly lit corridors, memories she had long buried began to resurface. Fragments of her childhood, images she hadn't thought about in years. She had been on another ship like this once before, a ship far from home, surrounded by the same eerie silence, the same strange, pulsing energy. She had escaped then, barely. But the fear, the suffocating dread that had clung to her even as a child, had never left her. She shook her head, trying to push the thoughts aside. That was a lifetime ago. She had to focus. Whatever was happening on this ship, it wasn't personal. It was a mystery, one she was determined to solve. As she rounded a corner, her comms crackled to life. "Captain," Avery's voice was strained. "You need to see this." Vega's pulse quickened as she turned and made her way toward his location. She found Avery standing in front of a massive door, its surface covered in strange, organic markings that seemed to shift and change as she watched. The door was wide open, and behind it lay a vast chamber, its walls lined with more of the same pulsing machinery. "Is this where the signal came from?" Vega asked. Avery nodded. "Looks like it, but it's different." Vega stepped into the chamber, her boots tapping softly on the floor. The room was a strange mix of technology and organic matter, the walls covered in thick, veiny growths that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. In the center of the room stood a massive console, its surface covered in strange symbols. "This is unlike anything I've ever seen." Myra's voice came over the comms. She was somewhere in the ship, exploring another section. "The technology, it's alive. Like the ship itself is a living organism." Vega felt a shiver run down her spine. This was beyond anything they had ever encountered. She reached out and touched the console, her fingers brushing against the smooth surface. The moment she did, the entire room seemed to hum with energy. A strange vibration filled the air, and the lights flickered. "Captain," Myra's voice came again, this time urgent. "I found something. You need to see this." Vega turned and sprinted down the hallway, her crew following behind. They reached Myra's location in record time, only to find the tech officer standing frozen in front of a massive viewport. The view was breathtaking, if not terrifying. Dozens of ships, all in various stages of disrepair, floated in the void outside, their hulls broken and twisted. But it wasn't just the ships that captured their attention. Something was moving. "Myra, what are you?" Vega started, but she stopped when she saw what had caught Myra's attention. At the center of the group of ships was something far more ominous. A massive structure, almost like a citadel, floating in the middle of the wreckage. The structure pulsed with an eerie light, and the closer the crew looked, the more they could see that it was moving. Slowly, imperceptibly, but definitely alive. That's the source of the signal," Myra whispered, her voice filled with dread. Before Vega could respond, she saw it. Movement in the dark, something moving in the shadows behind Myra. A shape, long and thin, stretching across the walls, just out of sight. "Myra," Vega shouted, reaching out to pull her back. But it was too late. Myra spun around, her helmet cam catching a glimpse of the shadow. Something was moving, something fast, something alive. Then the feed cut off. Myra's helmet cam went blank. Where did she go? Avery's voice crackled with panic. The crew turned to find that Myra had vanished. Vega's heart pounded in her chest as she rushed to the spot where Myra had been standing just moments before. There was no sign of her. No trace, no footprints, nothing. "What the hell is going on?" Vega whispered to herself. "Captain," Ryland's voice came over the comms, trembling. "Something's wrong. I think we're being hunted." The feed from Myra's helmet cam came back online, but it showed nothing but static. But then, through the flickering images, the crew saw it. A shadow moving swiftly behind Myra, just as she had turned. And then, everything went dark. Cliffhanger. Myra was gone. And the shadow, it wasn't alone. The Nova Drifter hummed softly as it drifted through the black expanse of space, the silent void stretching out endlessly before them. The crew, still reeling from Myra's sudden disappearance, huddled together in the ship's control room. The eerie feeling of being watched never left them. But now, it was more than just a feeling. It was a truth they could not ignore. Something on this ship had changed. "Did you hear that?" Ryland's voice came over the comms, his tone low, almost fearful. Vega's eyes snapped to the communication console. "What are you talking about?" Ryland hesitated, then spoke again, his words faint. "It sounds like Myra. I think I heard her voice." The hairs on the back of Vega's neck stood up. She glanced over to Avery and the others, their faces pale, their eyes filled with unease. "Myra's gone," Avery said, his voice shaking. "She was taken." "I know," Vega replied, her voice grim. "But this isn't Myra. It can't be." The voice came again, a garbled mix of static and faint whispers. It was unmistakably Myra's voice, but it was distorted, as if coming from a distance, from the void itself. "Help me. I'm still here." The voice flickered and broke, only to return stronger, clearer. "Captain, please, come deeper." Vega felt her chest tighten. "That's impossible. She's gone." Maybe it's a trap," Avery muttered, his eyes darting around the room. "Or maybe we're being led somewhere." Vega looked at the rest of the crew. "We're going after the signal," she decided, her voice firm despite the doubt gnawing at her. "We find Myra, or we find out what happened to her." They gathered their gear, the tension palpable as they prepared to leave the control room and head deeper into the ship. The corridors, once eerie and silent, now seemed even more oppressive, the walls seeming to close in on them. Every footstep echoed, and every breath felt louder than the last. As they made their way toward the source of the signal, the ship itself seemed to shift, the walls bending slightly, almost imperceptibly, as if the ship were alive, breathing along with them. "I don't like this," Avery whispered. "I've been feeling it too. Something's wrong." Vega didn't answer. She couldn't. The air felt thick with something unspoken, an energy that was impossible to ignore. As they moved forward, the crew passed through a series of twisting, narrow hallways. The walls seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy, the faint hum of alien machinery growing louder. The signal led them to a chamber, its entrance marked by strange symbols that seemed to change as they approached. Inside, the room was dark, only faint lights emanating from the machinery scattered around the space. At the center of the room stood a large console, its surface covered with unfamiliar markings. The walls, too, seemed to be shifting, the shapes becoming distorted as though viewed through a warped lens. Avery reached for his comms. "We're here, but I don't like this. It's like the room is breathing." Vega was about to respond when a voice cut through the static, clear and crisp. "You have come. Welcome." The crew froze. The voice was no longer distorted. It was Myra's voice. But there was something wrong, something chilling about it. It was too calm, too welcoming, as though she was speaking to them from another world. "This is where I belong now," the voice continued, its tone soothing, yet unnerving. "I am with the Fleetmaster. You should join us." A shiver ran down Vega's spine. The Fleetmaster. The words made no sense, and yet they felt familiar, like they were part of something she had heard before, perhaps in a dream. "Stop it, Myra," Vega called out, her voice steady but laced with fear. "This isn't you." A low, melodic chuckle echoed through the room. "It is, but you won't understand yet. Come closer, Captain. All of you." A sudden movement caught Vega's attention. She spun around, her hand reaching for her sidearm, but what she saw made her freeze. Rylan, who had been standing beside her just moments before, was now staring at the walls, his eyes wide with a glazed look. He muttered under his breath, "I hear it. I hear the Fleetmaster. It's calling to me." "Rylan, stop," Vega commanded, but he didn't respond. He stepped forward, moving slowly, like a puppet on strings. His movements were stiff, unnatural, as if he were being guided by some unseen force. "Rylan," Avery shouted, trying to pull him back, but it was too late. Rylan walked forward, disappearing into the darkness of the chamber. The voice continued to echo in the room, its words almost hypnotic. "Join us, Captain. There is no escape. The Fleetmaster has spoken." Vega grabbed Avery's arm, pulling him back. "We need to go now. This place isn't right. It's changing. Reality. It's warping." But as she spoke, she realized that the room was indeed changing. The walls were no longer straight, the angles bending in impossible directions. The floor tilted, and the ceiling stretched, as if the space itself had become an abstract painting, its rules defying all logic. "Vega," Avery gasped. "What's happening?" The air around them seemed to hum with energy, the lights flickering wildly. And then, in an instant, the entire room twisted. The shapes of the walls collapsed in on themselves, and the crew was suddenly thrust into a new reality, one that didn't make sense. Vega blinked. They were no longer in the same room. The walls had become a kaleidoscope of shifting shapes. Time was moving strangely, fast, slow, out of sync. The crew's voices echoed back to them, distorted, as though they were speaking from another time. "This is impossible," Vega muttered, her hand gripping the console to steady herself. And then she heard it. A voice, one she knew all too well. "Captain, you're here." Vega turned, her heart pounding. Standing in front of her was herself. An older version of herself, one with more wrinkles, more weariness in her eyes, but unmistakably her. "What is this?" Vega demanded, her voice trembling. The older version of herself smiled softly. "You've come, Captain. You've always known this day would come. The Fleetmaster has chosen you. You just don't realize it yet." The room around them twisted again, and Vega's stomach lurched. The older version of herself reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You'll understand soon. the older Vega said, her voice full of finality. The crew stood frozen, trapped between realities. The ship was no longer just a vessel. It was alive, and it had a mind of its own. And now, it was playing with them. The reality around them shifted again, and everything went dark. Captain Arlen Vega stood before the alien fleet, a strange, cold feeling settling deep in his chest. He had once believed that the ships were abandoned, lifeless hulks adrift in the vast, empty reaches of space. But the deeper they went, the clearer it became that these ships weren't just empty. They were waiting, hibernating, and whatever had caused them to fall silent, it wasn't a natural disaster. It was something more sinister. The crew moved cautiously through the vast corridors of the central ship, their footsteps echoing loudly in the silence. The hum of the ship's systems was quieter now, almost as if the very walls of the vessel were holding their breath. Arlen couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, even though there were no signs of life. "Captain, I've been going through the records." Myra's voice crackled over the comms. "This ship isn't abandoned. It's in stasis, like it's waiting to be reactivated." Arlen turned sharply. "Stasis? You're telling me these ships have been dormant for 2,000 years?" Myra's voice was filled with a strange tension, as if she were talking from a distance. "Yes, Captain. These ships were part of a fleet that fought a war against something beyond the stars." The words struck Arlen like a hammer. A war, 2,000 years ago, against an enemy they could not understand. The silence around him seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment. What had happened to them? Why were they still here? Why had they not returned to their home? "Do you have any idea who they fought?" Arlen asked, trying to keep his voice steady. He felt a growing sense of dread, as though the very air around him was thick with secrets that he wasn't ready to uncover. There was a long pause before Myra answered, her voice distant and cold. "No, but whatever they fought, it wasn't natural. It was something beyond their understanding. And they lost." Arlen felt a chill run down his spine. "Lost? What do you mean? Lost how?" Before Myra could respond, the air was shattered by a sudden, sharp sound. It was faint at first, like a whisper in the static, but it quickly grew louder. It sounded almost like voices, multiple voices, all speaking in unison, but not in any language Arlen could understand. "Did you hear that?" Rylan asked, his voice tight with anxiety. "I hear it," Avery replied, his hand tightening around his weapon. "What the hell is that?" Arlen's heart pounded in his chest. He knew that voice. It was Myra's voice. But something was wrong. The tone was off, as if it were being twisted, distorted by something unseen. The words were broken, fragmented, but Arlen could make out one clear message. "Help us. You must. Save them, or we all perish." It was like a chorus of voices speaking through Myra, her voice mixed with others. Unfamiliar voices, distant and hollow. The words didn't make sense, yet they seemed urgent, desperate. "Something's wrong," Arlen muttered under his breath. "We need to get to the control room. Now." They moved quickly, but the ship seemed to resist them, its corridors stretching longer than they should, the walls narrowing, closing in on them. The deeper they ventured, the more the ship seemed to shift. The passageways were no longer straight, twisting in impossible ways, like they were being pulled into another dimension. By the time they reached the heart of the ship, the strange voices had grown louder, more insistent. The lights flickered, and the walls began to pulse, like the ship itself was coming alive. Arlen's mind raced. What had happened to Mara? What had happened to the crew of this ship? He had to find answers. Fast. Suddenly, they arrived at the central chamber. It was vast and dark, the walls lined with strange symbols that pulsed faintly with light. At the center of the room stood a massive alien console, its surface covered in shifting runes that made Arlen's head spin. It was as if the very air around them was charged with an unnatural energy. And standing before the console, staring at the intricate patterns, was Myra. "Stop!" Arlen shouted, his voice hoarse with panic. "Myra, don't touch that." But it was too late. Myra's hand hovered over the console, her fingers trembling. Then, with a sharp intake of breath, she touched it. The moment her hand made contact, the room seemed to explode with energy. The walls shuddered, the air crackling with power. The ship groaned, its systems coming to life with a deafening roar. The voices, those strange, otherworldly voices, grew louder, their words now impossible to ignore. "It's happening." Myra's voice came again, but it was no longer just Myra. It was multiple voices speaking in unison, a chorus of alien tongues, each one reverberating in Arlen's mind. "We are the Fleet Mastered," they said, their words sharp and cold. "You are the last to awaken. You will help us." Arlen's mind reeled. This wasn't just a ship. It wasn't just a war. This was something far more dangerous. The fleet wasn't hibernating. It had been waiting for something, someone, to activate it, to bring it back to life. And now it was awake. The ship's systems hummed with new life, its massive engines rumbling like a beast stirring. The air in the control room crackled with an unnatural hum. The once quiet ships had now come alive, their systems vibrating with power. Arlen's breath came in shallow gasps as he watched Myra, her form now standing eerily still in front of the alien console. Her hand, still resting on the surface, seemed to glow with an otherworldly energy. And for a moment, Arlen thought he saw her eyes flicker with a strange light. The voices had grown louder, more insistent, as if they were seeping into his very thoughts. "She's not Myra anymore," Avery muttered under his breath, his voice thick with fear. But Arlen didn't take his eyes off her. He could hear the voices too, their words coming in broken fragments, like the static of a broken comm system. "Fleetmind. Awakening. Need host." It wasn't just Myra anymore. The ship itself was speaking through her. It was as if the alien fleet had merged into one singular mind. A hive intelligence that had waited for eons to find a suitable vessel to control. And it had found one in Myra. The crew tried to step forward, but the room seemed to shift, the walls stretching and warping. It was as if the entire ship was alive, moving with purpose. The fleet was not just awakening. It was connecting, forming something greater than any of them could comprehend. A voice, deep and cold, reverberated through Arlen's mind. "You are too late. The Fleetmind is upon you." "Get away from her," Arlen shouted, stepping forward. But his voice seemed to disappear in the swirling chaos. The air itself seemed to distort, like a ripple in a pond. But Myra didn't respond. Her body trembled, her fingers twitching as if she were trying to break free. But the glow from the console intensified. Arlen's heart sank as he saw her skin start to twist and distort, her features merging with the alien energy that flowed through the ship. It was absorbing her, consuming her, and with each second that passed, she became less and less human, her form becoming more alien, more part of the ship. "No," Arlen cried, but it was too late. The crew tried to pull Myra away, but it was as if the ship itself was holding her in place. The glowing tendrils of energy from the console wrapped around her like chains, locking her in place. Then, with a final, hollow scream, Myra's body jerked once, and then fell completely still. A wave of dread washed over Arlen. The Fleetmind had taken her, absorbed her into its collective consciousness. She was no longer herself. She had become part of the fleet. The crew stood frozen, staring at the lifeless form of Myra, her eyes wide open, reflecting the cold glow of the alien symbols. But it wasn't just Myra who had changed. The ship had changed. The walls, once silent and dormant, now pulsed with a terrifying energy. The voices filled the air, louder, more cohesive. Arlen could hear them clearer now. They weren't just random whispers or fragments. They were speaking directly to him. "You will join us. You will help us." A vision suddenly flooded Arlen's mind, sharp and vivid. He saw the galaxy, its stars burning, planets disintegrating, civilizations being crushed under the weight of an unstoppable force. The Fleetmind was spreading, expanding, consuming everything in its path. If it reached Earth— No, no, Arlen whispered to himself, feeling his stomach twist with dread. The Fleetmind would destroy everything. It would burn the galaxy down until there was nothing left. Earth, humanity, everything. Gone. Arlen, a voice interrupted, pulling him out of the vision. He blinked, seeing the crew around him, all as shaken as he was. Rylan was staring at him, his face pale. "We need to leave. Now." But it was too late. The ship— no, the entire fleet— seemed to close in around them. The passageways shifting, twisting in impossible ways. The doorways had disappeared, and the walls bent like living tissue, closing them off from any chance of escape. "The fleet won't let us go," Arlen said, his voice tight. He knew it now. They were trapped. There was no escape. "Then what do we do?" Avery asked, his voice trembling. Arlen's mind raced. They were running out of time. The Fleetmind was awakening, its power growing stronger with every passing moment. They couldn't fight it. They couldn't outrun it. The only option left was to join it. But that thought made his stomach churn. To give in to the Fleetmind would mean to become one with it. To lose everything— his humanity, his memories, his very essence. But then, as if responding to his fear, a voice, calm and cold, echoed in his mind. "You are the last. You are the chosen one. We offer you a deal." The words felt like ice seeping into his veins. The vision of destruction returned, sharper now. He saw Earth in flames, humanity helpless in the face of the oncoming storm. And then, the voice spoke again, its tone promising something more. "Become our host. You will be the bridge. The Fleetmind will be unstoppable, and you will control it. You will save your people. You will save your Earth." Arlen's heart pounded in his chest. He didn't know if the offer was a lie, a trick, or a twisted truth. But he knew one thing for sure. If he didn't act now, Earth would be destroyed. "Arlen," Avery shouted, snapping him out of his trance. "Don't do this. We can still fight. We can." But Arlen didn't hear him. His eyes locked onto the massive alien console in the center of the room. The glowing symbols beckoned him, calling him forward. The Fleetmind was offering him a chance to save everything. But at what cost? Slowly, Arlen took a step forward, his hands shaking. He didn't want this. He didn't want to be the one to decide. But the weight of the galaxy was on his shoulders. Earth was in peril. His people were in danger. He had no choice. "I accept," Arlen whispered. The moment the words left his mouth, the ship shuddered, and a new terrifying energy surged through him. The console flickered to life, its symbols glowing brighter than ever. The Fleetmind had found its new host, and the galaxy's fate was now in Arlen's hands. As Arlen's body began to change, his mind expanding, a low hum echoed through the ship. The other ships in the fleet responded, their systems coming online with a terrifying synchronicity. The Fleetmind had found its new master, and Earth had only one hope left. The moment Arlen had accepted the Fleetmind's offer, he felt his very being shift. His body was no longer his own, yet it was. His thoughts, his mind, expanded, becoming something far greater than human. The alien ship resonated with him, its systems syncing with his own thoughts. He was the ship now. Its power, its will, its purpose flowed through him. The crew had been silent since the transformation, their faces pale as they watched him. But Arlen wasn't just a man anymore. He wasn't just a captain. He was the Fleetmind's chosen vessel, and with it he now held the power of the entire fleet. The thought of what that power could do, what he could do, sent a cold shiver down his spine. The power to control the fleet, the power to bend the stars. But that power came with a cost. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about control. And in his mind, The question was clear. Could he control it, or would it consume him? The thought of Mara and what had happened to her still weighed heavily on his heart. He remembered her last moments, her screams as the alien energy ripped through her, the cold stare she had given him as her humanity slipped away. She had become a part of the fleet. She had become something else. Arlen clenched his fists, the alien energy pulsing through his veins. He wasn't going to let that happen to him. He couldn't. Not again. The fleet is about to make a jump. The voice of the Fleetmind whispered in his mind. You are the bridge. The gate will open. The galaxy will burn. The words felt like ice. The Fleetmind's plans were unfolding, its ancient purpose awakening. The fleet was preparing for a system-wide jump, an event that would reshape reality itself. Arlen's vision blurred for a moment, his thoughts becoming disjointed as the ship's AI merged deeper with his consciousness. But then, a sudden clarity cut through the fog of confusion. Arlen felt the pulse of the ship, the hum of its engines, the quiet ticking of an unseen countdown. The fleet wasn't just going to make a jump, it was preparing for an invasion. A massive, galaxy-shattering leap into another system. The AI's voice echoed again, louder now. The Fleetmind requires your command. Prepare the fleet. The war begins. No, Arlen murmured, fighting to keep control of his mind. He couldn't let this happen. He couldn't let the Fleetmind's plans unfold. Earth, humanity, his people were still out there. He had to stop this. Arlen. Avery's voice cracked through the chaos, pulling him back to reality. What's happening? What did you do? Arlen's eyes snapped to his crew. They were all staring at him, their faces filled with a mix of fear and hope. They had seen what had happened to Myra. They had seen him merge with the Fleetmind. And now, they were waiting for him to lead them out of this nightmare. He could feel the weight of their expectations, the pressure of the galaxy's future pressing down on his shoulders. The Fleetmind had awakened, and now Arlen was its master. But at what cost? I'm not the one in control here, Arlen said, his voice barely a whisper. The Fleetmind has taken over, but it doesn't know who it's dealing with. The crew exchanged nervous glances. They were trapped. The fleet was preparing for the jump. The countdown was ticking down. They had no time left. We have to destroy the fleet, Avery said, his voice filled with urgency, even if it means taking you down with it. Arlen's heart skipped a beat. The words hit him like a physical blow. Destroy the fleet. Destroy everything he had just become. He could feel the Fleetmind's presence in his mind, a cold, unyielding force that pressed against his thoughts. The idea of killing himself, of ending this connection, felt like a betrayal. He wasn't sure if he could even do it. But as the countdown continued, the reality of the situation hit him. The Fleetmind's power was growing stronger. The galaxy would burn if they didn't act. The fleet was preparing for its final jump, and once it started, there would be no stopping it. I won't let it happen, Arlen said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. I will stop it. He could feel the ship responding to his command. The ship's eye was no longer just a tool, it was part of him. And he was part of it. He could feel every system, every ship in the fleet. He could feel their readiness to jump. The fleet was a living thing now, and it was waiting for him to lead it. But Arlen wasn't going to let it lead him. He turned to his crew, his eyes hard with determination. We're not running. We're not hiding. We're going to destroy the fleet. Avery's eyes widened. How? You're one with it now. You. I'm not just one with it, Arlen interrupted. I'm going to fight it. The crew looked at him, uncertain. They knew what that meant. They knew that destroying the fleet would be a death sentence, for Arlen, for all of them. But they had no choice. The countdown continued. 10, 9, 8. Arlen could feel the ship's systems preparing for the jump. He could feel the Fleetmind pushing against his thoughts, trying to take control. But he wasn't going to let it win. He wasn't going to let it have Earth. He wasn't going to let it burn the galaxy. He reached out, connecting with the ship's eye, focusing all his energy into the systems. The ship's power surged in response, and for a moment, Arlen felt the fleet hesitate. It wasn't just following orders anymore. It was waiting for him to decide. "Arlen," Avery said, his voice shaking. "We have to do it now." Arlen took a deep breath, his fingers hovering over the control panel. The fleet was ready to jump, the systems primed for the invasion. The moment he activated the sequence, it would all end. He would destroy the fleet, and with it, himself. But if he didn't, Earth would be lost. The countdown reached 5. He couldn't wait any longer. Arlen slammed his hand down on the control panel. And then, everything stopped. The countdown froze. The ship's hum faded. The walls of the ship seemed to breathe, alive, watching. Then, from the shadows, a figure appeared. Myra. She stood in front of them, her eyes empty, her body no longer human. Her skin was pale, her hair moving as if caught in an unseen wind. The voices of the Fleetmind echoed in the air, blending with her own voice. "It's already too late," Myra said, her voice hollow, unnatural. Arlen's heart dropped. The Fleetmind had won. It had already taken control. And now, the war had truly begun. The last words lingered in the air, and Arlen felt a chill wash over him. The Fleetmind was not just in control of the fleet. It had already infiltrated them all. It was already too late. Arlen's mind raced as he stood at the heart of the ship's control center, the alien machinery pulsing around him like the very heartbeat of the fleet. The Fleetmind's presence had filled every corner of his thoughts, a suffocating darkness that sought to consume him, to rewrite his very identity. But despite it all, one thought lingered, a desperate final chance to warn Earth, to stop this madness before it could even begin. The countdown had stopped. The ships had halted their impending jump. Myra's chilling words still echoed in his mind, like a death knell. "It's already too late." But for Arlen, it wasn't over yet. He had the power, or what remained of it, to change the course of history. The Fleetmind's hive mind pulsed in his consciousness, pressing against his will, but it was weakened. If he could just break through. With one final, desperate breath, Arlen stretched out his hand toward the console. His fingers hovered over the control panel, the same panel he had used to merge with the ship's eye. Now it was his tool of destruction, or his tool of salvation. The ship's AI responded instantly, its vast network of systems shifting to align with his will. The fleet was preparing for the jump again, but this time, Arlen wasn't going to let it. He focused all his remaining energy into the control system, his mind burning with the thought of Earth. His home, his people. He had to warn them. He had to stop this invasion before it began. He could feel the ripples in the fabric of time as he activated the sequence. A shudder passed through the ship, a deep vibration that seemed to tear at the very reality around him. Then the rift opened, a breach in time. The familiar stars of the Andromeda system blurred and twisted as a wave of energy pulsed outward, sending a powerful signal back to Earth's past. The fleet was coming. The fleet, the hive, the invasion, all of it. He had sent the message. And in that moment, Arlen felt his connection to the Fleetmind falter. He had done it. He had created a rift in time, a fracture that would warn Earth, a chance for them to prepare. But just as quickly, the alien ships began to tremble. The collapsing star system ahead of them was unstable. The fleet's systems were no longer holding together. The energy required to keep the time rift open was too much. The ship was breaking apart. Arlen tried to focus, tried to pull everything back together, but the power of the fleet, the power of the Fleetmind, was beyond him. He could feel the fleet crumbling around him, collapsing into the dying star system, pulled into a gravitational vortex of destruction. The last thing Arlen saw before the world around him disintegrated was the stars fading into oblivion. The fleet, the ships, the AI, All of it was imploding in a flash of light too bright to comprehend. Underscore, underscore, underscore. Years later, the wreckage of the Andromeda fleet drifted through space, scattered like ashes in a cosmic wind. The remains of a once great armada now lay in pieces, broken beyond repair. A single escape pod floated in the debris field, its exterior scorched by the radiation of the collapsing star system. Its systems flickered weakly as it drifted, carried by the currents of space. Inside, a small child sat, her eyes wide, staring out at the dark void beyond the small window. Her face was calm, unreadable, but there was something else about her. Something wrong. The child had no memory of who she was or how she had gotten there. But there was one thing that stood out, the eerie, unsettling knowledge in her eyes. She could remember things that she should never have known. She could hear the voices of the fleet, the whispers that had plagued the crew of the ghost ships, the same voices Arlen had heard in his final moments. The pod's sensors beeped faintly, its low-power systems barely keeping it functioning. And as the child stared into the vast emptiness of space, she whispered, "It's not over. It's only just begun." The child's fingers pressed against the cold glass of the escape pod's window as the whispers grew louder. Her eyes narrowed as she focused on something in the distance, a signal, faint, distorted, but familiar. It was the same signal that had reached out from the heart of the Andromeda system years ago. The ghost signal. And this time, it was closer, much closer. The child's lips parted as the message finally came through, clear as day, cutting through the static. "The Fleetmind is awake." And then, another message, cold and metallic, echoed in the darkness. "The Milky Way is next." The echoes of the Fleetmind lingered in the void, a chilling reminder that some wars never end. And for Arlen, for the crew, and for humanity, the ashes of Andromeda had only marked the beginning. The ghost signal from the Milky Way reached out, signaling the start of something far greater than anyone could have ever imagined. Something beyond the stars.